Doxbin is a website that has been used on many occasions to obviously dox and harass people online. It's a very unsavory website that is mostly used in a negative way to those who fall victim to whoever the poster is. But on October 24th, 2022, a Doxbin user named PedoHunters would release a long expose about a Discord user named Rabid7997. At first, it just seemed like any normal dox online, except in this case, the user would have receipts to back up his claims. As push came to shove, people would realize that Rabid7997 wasn't a victim of a harassment attack, but somebody who had a lot of stuff hiding in the closet, and of course, this stuff would be exposed for the world to see. Meet Rabid7997, aka 47-year-old Richard Anthony Raina Densmore. Densmore would be the victim of this Doxbin article, except when checking out the evidence provided, it seemed that PedoHunters wasn't lying about him, as you're about to hear for yourself.
You ever just want to f a minor in front of people that hate you? I do. You ever just want to watch a minor f***ing herself in front of a bunch of haters? Minors. Minors.
That's some pretty bold stuff for a man in his late 40s to proclaim all nonchalant on the internet like that, and I'm willing to bet this is a clip that tipped off the Doxbin user to look further into the man to see what was up with him. That includes figuring out his past as a military man when he was young and in his 20s, and that also includes finding out that when he was 20 years old he had relations with a minor and was charged for it in the 4th degree, having to sign himself on the registry for 15 total years before that expired on March 18th, 2022. Of course, given that clip we just listened to, it was clear he was on the same wavelength, so to speak, and so that would lead to this Doxbin article dropping just 7 months later and introducing people to this sick man indeed. It turns out that Densmore here was an active member of Sewer, aka Sewer Pig, one of the many offshoots of the 764 cult, with this picture of a pig being their main calling sign of this sector online. For those that have seen my last video on Cal Spitze, y'all probably already know the heinous things within 764, but for those that haven't seen it yet, let me give y'all a quick rundown. 764 members scour social media and child-friendly games like Roblox, drag children into their Discord or Telegram chats, make them do something embarrassing like send nude images of themselves to them, and when they try to leave the group, they use it as leverage to torture them online, ranging from getting them to cut their names into themselves to killing their pets, sometimes even getting some members to self-commit on camera. There's some straight-up evil people, no doubt, so it comes to no one's surprise that Densmore here has bragged about doing the same exact stuff to others online while somebody was recording unbeknownst to him. Now, unlike how most stories online go when it comes to these cases, Densmore would actually attract the attention of the authorities, as on January 31st, 2024, he would be arrested by the FBI due to a report of him making users on Discord create, distribute, and stream CP featuring self-harm during his time online. Turns out that just 2 months before the Doxbin post was made, the FBI would receive a complaint that he was grooming minors into producing CP and self-harm images, with the FBI figuring that out pretty quickly on their end. It turns out that it was a 15-year-old girl in question that Richard was grooming, in which for some stupid reason he would tell her his first name, which made things a whole lot easier for the FBI, in which he would get the girl to quote a video of herself on Sewer in which she inserted an ice cube into herself, unquote. Where things get weird is that back in February 2023, the FBI would actually raid his place and find sea salmon material related to the 764 cult, but he would end up staying a free man for another 11 total months due to what is assumed to be a very slow investigation for some reason. However, they raid him again in January 2024, in which they found 2 cell phones hidden in an air vent, and y'all already know this spells doom, as there's only one reason why anyone would ever hide their phone, let alone 2, in a spot like that. In fact, one of those contained the following pieces of media, quote, additionally, investigators found images on one of the phones that included a girl with Rabid written on her forehead, and pictures of lines cut into a girl's legs in the letter R, bleeding, and another with cuts into a woman's chest, unquote. Now, despite these pieces of evidence being exposed during a court hearing, Judge Ray Kent overseeing the case would instead give him a $10,000 bond due to the fact there was no proof he was a hands-on offender, basically letting him free once more. Part of that defense included that he's a diagnosed schizophrenic with BPD because of his time serving in the military. But it didn't matter as the judge made his decision and it was back to the drawing board. It was now up to Chief U.S. District Judge Hala Jarboe, who was overseeing the emergency motion here in the Department of Justice, put in to revoke his bond or not, and so people would sit by and wait to see what would happen to dear old Richard Densmore here. As people are waiting to see what the future held for Densmore, leaked recordings of some calls he had with other 764 members back during the February 2023 FBI raid would come out, in which he talks about how they waited for him to leave his home before detaining him, bragging about how they didn't catch any of the illegal material he had on him.
And then you know what they did at the end of it? They let me go.
The kids are stupid.
That's why I'm not in jail right now, because all the shit was, they looked through my phone, they looked through my blogs on Snapchat, Telegram, everything. There was no CP mega file with child porn in it. There was no grooming DMs. There was nothing. But they did find loaded weapons because I did have those, and those are illegal. And that's a felony. It's a 10-year felony. I'm going to be going to prison for that. Not for any satanic cult, not for any Discord grooming, not for any of that. just for the weapons.
He would even show off a document the FBI gave to him in that call, showing that he wasn't lying to everybody and trying to make up stuff to seem cool or whatever. Now that emergency motion to revoke Densmore's bond, while certainly fun to read, really wasn't anything more we already learned here together, so it's not worth going too deep into it. That's not to say it wasn't interesting still, as it contained more photos of him, including what looked to be a screenshot of a screen recording he had doing God knows what's whatever underage kid he was abusing. Alongside that would be more random photos the FBI put together and snapped a picture of before going along their merry way. And the rest of the motion is what we've talked about already, except much deeper in detail law-wise, naming off the exact laws he broke and such. As his future hung in the balance, Densmore didn't seem too happy that this was getting in the way of his freedom, as a leaked Snapchat message would come out of him saying the feds are trying to get him for child exploitation, but then starts to complain how all he wanted was a satanic blood cult and nothing more, name-dropping somebody named Abby and saying she helped steal cultists from somewhere else to form Sewer. He then says somebody named Water was to blame for all the grooming stuff, but it was obvious he was just pushing blame onto someone else, as we already know he was doing this stuff as well. The other person in the Snapchat messages would ask if they have any dirt on him, Densmore would say just the cut signs, and he would say it was GG for him and that he and another 764 member named Goon will carry his legacy on. Interestingly enough, Densmore would go on to tell him that they need to delete 764 members Epstein and Sakurun's Discord servers now, quite possibly due to the feds going through his phone, before the screenshot ends shortly after. I will say, I have no idea when these messages were posted as there's no date attached to them, but I believe they're related to the 2024 FBI raid, as he mentions they're going after him for child exploitation, whereas in a clip from the 2023 raid he said they found nothing of that in his house. However, it didn't really matter that much in the end, as just 3 days after the Department of Justice filed their emergency motion to revoke his bond, Judge Darbo would actually grant it, meaning that Richard Densmore here was heading straight to jail as they awaited his oncoming trial on April 2nd. That would happen, however, as on March 15th, 2024, Densmore would agree to a plea deal in the terms within. What's interesting about the deal is it actually goes into detail on what he pled guilty to, in which on September 29th, 2022, he was coercing somebody he knew was underage to send an NSFW picture of her breast with his online handle Rabid written on them, even saying he'd buy her Discord Nitro to try and convince her into doing so. When this failed, he would go to the DMs of the girl's partner and try to convince them into letting her send a picture, also saying he'd give them Discord Nitro as well. Eventually, the partner would successfully convince the girl into giving in to Densmore's request, sending a picture of her entire frontal body naked with his name written on her chest. They now had hard evidence of him asking and successfully obtaining CP after he manipulated the parties into his bidding, and so in that plea deal, he would plead guilty to 1 count of sexual exploitation of a minor, a count that holds a 15 to 30 year sentence if convicted. His sentencing would be scheduled for November 7th, and on that very November 7th, 2024 day, Richard Anthony Raymond Densmore would get the book thrown at him and be sentenced to a maximum 30 years in prison, where he will rot until his late 70s if he even makes it that far. The Department of Justice report that broke this news would drop even more information about Densmore and the stuff he was doing online. Quote, he threatened victims to cut themselves by telling them, I have all your information. I own you. You do what I say now, kitten. Densmore kept child CP and bloody images of Rabid, Sewer, and 764 carved into victims' limbs, in some cases with razor blades and box cutters nearby, unquote. It seems that it's all but officially over for the man, and now his life will be nothing but avoiding to let his little secret out in jail, because as we all know, life ain't exactly easy for pedos in prison. Also, since we're on the topic, here's a picture of his arrest back in January, here's a picture of when he was first transferred to jail, and here's the most current picture that has leaked out of him from beyond the barbed wire fence. It's safe to say Richard Densmore here won't have a good time behind bars, and thankfully another member of the 764 cult was caught and sent to prison like they all deserve to be. Now, as we've gone over through the past couple weeks, we've seen just how bad the 764 cult can get. These aren't your average internet edgelords. These are some of the worst humanity has to offer, who can and will abuse any child they get their hands on for their own sick kicks. Shout out to my channel members for helping support my content, and shout out to my bestie tier members Wrath Roland, Nami, Cody, Laura Hertzman, Cheems, Daniel, Mystical GB, and Hyper aka V. Go check out my Patreon and YouTube memberships if you want to support me yourself in the description below, and I hope you join as soon as you can. It's a good thing the authorities have been cracking down on them, but with all the work they're doing, that begs a question. How did things even get to this point, and better yet, how did 764 even start off to begin with? Well, my friends, that's its own story to be told entirely, because let's just say that despite the past 2 people we've talked about recently, the origins of this cult all starts with somebody who surpasses dear old Richard and Kyle by a good margin if you ask me.